Welcome to Forensic Friday,
where we examine the intersection of true crime, psychology, and the heart of being human in the middle of it all. Last week, we dove into megachurch madness, which was really tough for us. Like, we were joking after, we were sweating and stressed out because we just wanted to be mindful of all of the dynamics at play and all the people that we love who go to church and all the people we love who don't go to church. And we just wanted to be respectful. And so far, we've had a lot of good responses to that. But we want to continue the discussion about high control groups because we have seen a few modern examples and then there's some older examples. And we want to talk about the psychology of them, how people get wrapped into them, and really how to prevent it and maybe even how to help somebody. And quite honestly, they're a little bit of like spiritual and a little bit pyramid schemey in many ways. And so to break it down to the core, like LuLaRoe could be a little bit of a high control group, like there's a lot of organizations that sort of run this way. What makes a couple of these different is they involve spirituality and typically also involve sex for the reasons that we've already identified in our Megachurch Madness episode. Those are the things that tend to really pull people in and keep them stuck somewhere because it's like our core values, it's who we are, and we get kind of smashed into these little groups and we can't get out.
Right. So where are we starting?
We are going to start with, first of all, a definition of high control groups, and then we're going to go back. We're going to talk about Jonestown. We're going to talk about NXIVM, the sex cult.
Yep.
Really good show on HBO called The Vow that breaks that down, but we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about the 7M dance cult, which is all over social media right now. So we're going to talk about those three kind of as our examples.
And you said The Vow is on HBO.
HBO Max, yeah.
Okay.
It's so good. It's hard to watch, but there's a couple of really brave people. Okay. And one of them, Sarah Edmondson, who's I'm like a super fan of, I will talk about her, has a podcast called, I think it's called A Little Bit Culty.
Okay.
Which is cool. Really cool if you want to. And my mom, of course, after she watched The Vow, my mom is prone to DM anybody. Tom Brady, whoever. She will DM you on Instagram. That is who she is. I come by it, honestly,
That's awesome.
So mom actually messaged her after she watched The Vow and she wrote back.
Dang.
She wrote my mom back and they talked
a little bit.
I know. It's really sweet. So
I love when people like that do that, like respond and are human beings.
She is such a cool person and so stinking brave. And there's a couple other brave people kind of sprinkled throughout here. So we're going to talk about it.
Good.
So first of all, how about a working definition of high control groups? Because, we joke about like drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Well, that actually comes from Jonestown. So that's why we're going to start with that one.
Okay.
It's one of the OGs, right?
It is the OG. I love that we're starting from like back then too, because that was a big deal.
Well, yeah. And I mean, really, if we look at high control groups, they probably go back to the beginning of time. I mean, I think people have been controlling other people as long as there have been people on the earth.
Yes. I mean, most of our episodes surround some level of control.
Absolutely. What these groups do, though, is they encourage believers to disengage from so-called world affairs. So it's this idea that we're sort of set apart in some way. Shun or limit interactions with non-believers. That's one of the hallmarks of a cult, is we isolate you, right? And maintain a distinct identity separate from mainstream culture, reinforcing group cohesion and control. So that's really kind of what underpins a high control group is we need to be separate, different. And really why that's the thing is because if you are hobnobbing with people who are not in the group, you might decide the group's not so cool anymore and it falls apart.
Right.
So we got to keep it tight.
Yes. And isolate.
Isolate, for sure. So when we talk about domestic violence, power and control patterns, this is that on steroids. right? This is that with a group. And actually, I don't know if I've ever told you this before. I actually counseled a cult leader. Did I tell you this?
No, you did not.
I did too, years
That is
and years ago.
wild.
Uh-huh. Actually, it was a domestic violence client. I'm changing details, so I'm protecting this person's identity,
Okay.
changing some of the details. But this person, through one of their interests that I'm not going to name, they had a specific interest where they ran classes about something, and they tended to have younger women attend their classes. And then they would start paying for things for these women, and they had expectations in exchange. So it looked a little bit sugar daddy-esque. But then when you really got down into it, it actually started to get culty. And there were quite a few women involved in this, and the DV charge sprung up from one of those women.
Oh, dang. Did he know he was a cult leader?
Well, I told him, and he laughed because I think he knew.
Right.
But yeah, we had to really work on that. That was one of my more challenging cases ever.
Wow. I'm impressed. I can't
Yeah.
believe I didn't know about that.
Nat, I've had some odd ones in my day. I really have, and I'm kind of known for it, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. Like, I
Yeah,
never have a boring day at work, but I do sometimes get the squirrely ones.
this is true. I do too, but I think you get like, I mean, I don't think I've ever had a cult leader.
Mm-mm. No, and you know what? It took me probably 2 or 3 months using some of the things we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
When I started seeing some of these pieces, I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out there were 4 or 5 or 6 other women kind of that he was controlling. And then there was about a 40-year age difference between him and these women. And there was sex involved.
I feel like you and I talked about this. I think I was your intern still.
I think so too.
I think because I vaguely remember these details. I think I was your intern.
Yeah, and I had to actually consult. I had to get some outside
Mm-hmm.
consultation because it was a really
Mm-hmm.
challenging case.
That's wild.
So I'm not going to go into any more details, but that
No,
it was a really good experience for me. I learned an awful lot.
I
Um,
believe it.
I don't think there was a lot of change that happened though, because being in this kind of a position with people is intoxicating for the leader.
Right. Well, it's powerful. They
It's
feel
so
like
powerful.
they have all the power.
And even criminal charges was not enough for this person
Yeah.
to think, oh, maybe I should do this different. It was sort of like, oh, well, I picked a dud in that one. I should pick somebody else.
Yeah.
That was about as far as we got. And I'm like, I don't know that that's a treatment goal.
Yeah, that was before some of the modalities that we had later around
Yes.
thinking. And that's tough because sometimes put into the wrong group, they get better at doing what they're doing.
Well, and the other thing that was interesting is in my interactions with this person, they actually tried to use some of these strategies on me regarding what I believe and some of that kind of stuff, which didn't go well
Mm-hmm.
just because I know what I believe and I'm not vulnerable in the ways that some of these
Yeah.
other folks were vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking like he is putting in work right now with me. Like
Yeah.
this is if I was a really wounded, broken person, younger,
Yeah.
and I had a gaping hole in my attachment,
Yeah.
I can see how people would get sucked in,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Well, it's shiny for people
Yes.
with big attachment stuff.
And you feel special when you get in a group that is
Mhm.
all bought into the same thing, which
Yeah.
kind of brings me into Jonestown. So Jonestown was a group. It was started by Jim Jones, okay, which is not actually the Jonestown connection, but whatever.
Right.
It was Jim. I thought that for a long time, but it's actually because this all went down in Jonestown, Guyana at the end. So anyway, we'll
Right.
come back to
Right.
that. So Jim Jones starts this group and he is recruiting people. It was like 1955, and he calls it the People's Temple. And he actually started it in Indianapolis, and it stood out in the community because it was multiracial. It was a very diverse group.
Right. I remember that when I watched the
Uh-huh.
documentary a long time ago in school.
Yes. And he encouraged,
Mhm.
interracial marriage and some of that kind of stuff, which was
Yes.
really a little bit ahead of the times in some ways in the 50s. Like that
Yes.
wasn't something you saw, especially in the Midwest, in Indianapolis.
Yeah, which is why people were, I think, were really drawn to him.
Yeah, he looked very progressive and
Yeah.
like he really cared about people. So in the early 1960s, he read an Esquire article that listed the 9 like safest places in the world to live in the case of a nuclear catastrophe. So
Interesting.
this is kind of like Cold War-ish stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
where it was still pretty scary, and you had kids doing drills at school and they're getting under desks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he started to get really paranoid.
Mm,
I know. One of these places was in Eureka, California. So he's like, we need to go to California. So he relocates
okay.
from Indianapolis, and these folks go with him, and he starts predicting that there will be a nuclear attack in July of 1967. So he's having some kind of a break.
Right.
We'll talk about a little bit with his psychology. He started to get really paranoid, and he wanted his members to really get on board with his apocalyptic vision,
Okay.
like what he thought was going to happen. So they go up to California. They're kind of up in the Redwood Valley, and then some of them go to San Francisco and LA, all the way through like the mid 70s.
Okay.
So, really, at the end of the day, this was a racially diverse, mixed family, in quotes,
Hmm.
dedicated to improving the world. And what people talk about so much is it wasn't so much about Jim Jones, it was the people.
Yeah.
The people were really cool. They did stuff in the community. There were recovering addicts. There were people who, were getting out of prison, were joining this, and they were cool people.
Yeah.
So the real draw was the people. So Jim Jones links up with this guy, Father Divine, who was an older Black evangelist, and he founded the Peace Mission movement. And he was sort of on his last legs when he linked up with Jim Jones, and I think that Jim Jones knew that. So Jim, when Father Divine died in 1965, Jim Jones tried to take over that whole group,
Hmm.
Father Divine's group, the Peace Mission movement.
Okay.
And Mother Divine is like, hell no. And I'm
Right.
thinking Mother Divine was his wife. Okay. So she's like, nope, not happening.
Right.
Take you and your people, get out of here. Right.
Yeah.
So then Jim Jones kind of regroups. Okay. He regroups. He gets arrested in 1973 for lewd conduct at a movie theater, which here comes the sex piece, right? Here it
Mhm.
comes. Not that it probably hadn't been there, but this is
Right.
when we start being aware of it.
Right.
He comes out with a claim that he's the only heterosexual on earth,
Huh.
right?
That's a statement.
Which is weird because there are married people in his group.
Right.
And also, he's sleeping with both men and women in the group.
Okay,
And this is
so
where cults start to lose me, okay? Because there's always like some weird shit in the middle
mhm.
that people attach to that don't make sense. It's like, I'm here for it. Like, we're going to change the world. We're activists.
Yes.
We're progressive. I'm in it. And then it's like, I'm the only heterosexual on earth and I'm sleeping with men. And I'm like,
What?
why don't people kind of grab onto that a little more?
Right.
But they
Like
don't. They never do. It takes
red
a hard right
flag.
and we just go with them.
Right.
We're like, yeah, he's a little crazy, but we're going to stay in the group.
Oh my gosh. I know.
I'm just not wired like this. I don't think,
No. Well,
you
neither
know?
one of us are. Like
No,
we see some weird stuff happening and both of us are like, what?
no. We
You know
are
what I
the
mean?
two in a staff meeting, even who will be like,
Huh?
are we sure?
Uh-huh.
Which is great.
Uh,
And we're going to do an episode actually someday about how we were raised to be such
yes.
independent thinkers. So we're going to talk
Yes.
about that a little bit because that's pretty
Yes.
cool. Okay, so the only heterosexual on earth is sleeping with men and women in the group, even though he's married with adopted children. He thought all of his followers were actually gay, and he decides I used to love interracial marriage, but now I don't want any romantic connections in the group because it was undermining like his vision, probably because people are starting to be like, dude's bizarre.
Right.
We can't have married couples. One of the best things about being married is you
Mm-hmm.
go to a party, you get in the car and you talk about everybody.
Yeah,
Is that not one of the best things
it's
about being
true.
married?
Yes.
So
You
these
have like your
cults,
forever person that you can share everything to.
and they don't judge you because you're allowed to gossip with them.
Yeah.
I can tell them anything. So we get in the car and we dissect everything. That's one of the best parts of being married. You
Yes.
can't have married couples because they're getting in their car going, he has lost it,
Right.
right?
Right. Yes.
So he's got to shift gears. And I think some people are still completely bought in, but there's a couple people who are starting to maybe
Mm-hmm.
question a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. So then there's a little bit of an issue that happens. And this is really what led to the tragedy in some ways. So there was a man and a woman named Tim and Grace Stone.
Mm-hmm.
They are married followers. They started in the early years. Tim was an attorney for the temple, and Grace was really in that inner circle.
Okay.
Okay. So in 1972, Grace gives birth to John Victor Stone, and Jones claimed to be the father.
Mm.
And Tim actually signed an affidavit confirming that Jones was the father.
Mm-hmm. Dang.
Mm-hmm. But then Grace starts realizing this is bananas. Like I can't do these people anymore, right?
Right.
So she defects in 1976, but she left her son there
Mm.
with him because she was really worried for their safety.
Mm-hmm.
And I think her thought was maybe her son would actually be safer there
Mm.
than with her because he might have kept looking,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
which that's a hard choice I think she had to make.
Yeah.
So then Tim leaves a year later. And this is the interesting thing about married couples in these groups. I've seen this in a few of the examples. If the husband leaves, the wife leaves. If the wife leaves, the husband typically leaves.
Right.
They may
Which,
or may not stay together after,
right. Yep.
but this is exactly what Jim Jones was afraid of,
Uh-huh.
right? So Tim left a year later. They go to the US and they want to get their kid. So
Mm.
they're in the US trying to get their kid, but by this time, Jim Jones went to Guyana
Mm-hmm.
and he had all of his people posted up there. And I mean, this was a large group of folks, like 900 people, something,
Right.
maybe
Right.
1,000.
Yeah.
A lot of people. So they're like fighting through the US to try to get their kiddo.
Mm.
Yes. So, how this thing kind of finally unraveled, there were people like Grace and Tim, family members of the people in Guyana who were starting to raise a ruckus about this. This is not okay. Bad things are happening.
Right.
He's losing it. So they get on the radar of a congressman named Leo Ryan.
Mm.
I have become a fan of Leo Ryan.
Okay.
They describe him as a hard charging politician. Like he's like a bull in
Oh,
a china shop kind of dude,
yeah.
which is my kind of people.
I was gonna say that's like your style.
Yeah, not a lot of finesse, but just like a blunt objects. He's like,
Yeah.
we're just going to go down there and see what's happening, right? Which is
Yes.
totally what I would want to do.
Yes.
So that's exactly what he did, Nat. He and some journalists and a
Uh-huh.
group of people go down to Guyana and they're like, tell us everything. We want to know everything.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they talk to everybody who's there. Okay. Well, as you can imagine, Jim Jones, not pleased.
Well, no, he's like, they're
Uh-huh.
about to expose me.
Well, and a few of the members told Leo Ryan, Congressman Ryan,
Hmm.
we want to go home. We don't
Yeah.
actually want to be here. We want to go back to the US.
Yeah.
They were kind of slipping him information when he was there.
Yeah.
And some of the family members came with him.
Mm.
So like they wanted their people back.
Yeah.
So Leo Ryan, Congressman Ryan, he does this trip just as he's fixing to leave. I think he was actually by the airfield. A couple people from the group, from the temple,
Mm-hmm.
drove by and gunned them all down.
Mm.
Killed Leo Ryan, killed, I think, 4 other people, and then injured some people as well.
Mm.
And
That's
so
really sad.
Congressman Ryan ended up getting the Congressional Gold Medal for that.
Mhm.
It was so brave what he did, and he brought all of this attention. Unfortunately, it also set into effect what would then happen because then Jim Jones is super paranoid and
Mhm.
he's like, we just have to end this now. So he tells more than 900 followers that they had to commit suicide or the Guyanese military will come in and take their children.
Mm.
And it's funny when you do the research. I think Kool-Aid really didn't like the fact that that was the name. It was actually Flavor Aid, not
Okay.
Kool-Aid. It was technically
So not
Flavor Aid.
Kool-Aid for everyone listening.
Kool-Aid really wants you to know that it was
Yes,
Flavor Aid and not Kool-Aid.
not Kool-Aid.
Yes. So they cooked up a whole batch of Flavor Aid mixed with cyanide,
Mhm.
and basically they gave it to the children first, including Jim Jones' son. Well, Grace's son. I believe Grace and Tim's son. He was one of the victims. But they gave it to the children first, and then most of the adults. Now, there were a few survivors. There was a group of 11 that left for, I love these people. I probably would have been in this group. We're going to have a picnic. They're like, we're just going to go for a walk. Well, that walk was a 35-mile walk to escape what happened. So there
Dang.
were people who got out. There was that group. There was an elderly woman who slept through the whole thing. Hyacinth slept through the whole thing.
Oh, like on purpose?
No, Hyacinth woke up, everybody's dead. But Hyacinth slept through the whole thing.
That's wild.
Isn't that crazy?
How, like, what did you read about her?
Nothing really, just that I think she really came out against Jim Jones after
Okay.
the fact. But
Okay.
when she woke up, like everybody was dead. But she slept through the whole thing.
I wonder if there's like an interview with her.
I'm sure there is. I'm
Oh.
sure. So there's a lot of controversy about what to call it because most people are saying it's actually more of a mass murder. Jim
Mhm.
Jones died as well. He was shot in the head. They don't know if he shot himself in the head or if
Mm.
his nurse shot him and then she killed herself.
Oh my gosh.
So Jim Jones dies in it too. The nurse, his nurse, I don't know why he had a nurse. It's not very clear. But anyway, they died too. And I thought this was interesting too. Now, I didn't know this, but long before this, he
Mhm.
had them do a rehearsal in which he told them to drink something that he said was poison
Yes, no, I knew about that.
to see if they were loyal.
Yep. Yep.
And part of why they say it was a murder and not a mass suicide is because there were armed guards with guns and crossbows to make sure nobody got out alive.
So how did that group get out? Like they just said, we're gonna go for a walk?
I think they got up like super early in the morning and they were just like, we'll be back in an hour, and they were like gone.
Wow.
I know. It's
So
really
but that
kind of
was
amazing.
before he like handed out the
And I think it was
Flavorade.
before the congressman was gunned down because when the congressman was gunned down, then I think Jim Jones was like, they're coming for us. Like, I think he just knew. I don't
Yeah.
think it would have been the Guyanese military that was going to come take the children, but I think the US government, I think there were people that were going to come down there and investigate what happened to the congressman and it was going to be over.
Right. Right.
So I think there were people who did this math pretty fast and got out.
Dang.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So that is Jonestown. So when you
Okay.
hear the expression drinking the Kool-Aid, it was Flavor Aid and it was
Yeah.
Jonestown. And Jim Jones is no longer. And there was no nuclear apocalypse on the day that he said, and they still stayed after that.
So wild.
Uh-huh. Crazy.
So wild.
Yes. So the next group we're going to break down,
Yep.
and this one probably people have heard a little bit about, but we're going to talk about NXIVM.
Uh-huh.
And this is Keith Raniere, who can we just talk about this jackass? Like, have you seen him?
No, so here's the thing, Janine. I don't know that much about this situation. I have done no research on this because I knew you were going to cover it.
Okay, that
I've
makes me
done no
excited. I
research.
figured you know everything about this because this is insane.
No, I know nothing.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to tell you all about it.
Okay.
Okay. So there's this dude, Keith Raniere.
Okay.
Okay, I'm trying to think what he looks like.
I mean, based on your face, he sounds like a royal jackass.
Oh my gosh. Okay. He is, I don't know, maybe 5'6".
Okay.
He walks around like he's 6'4", but he's 5'6", long, kind of long dark hair, like yucky hair.
Okay,
Okay.
what's his name?
Keith Raniere, Reniere. Now it's gonna pull up a picture. I can't wait to get your hot take on this
Oh,
dude.
Keith Raniere.
Yes. How this guy made a single friend, I'll never know, let alone a cult.
He just looks off.
Yes. I'm trying to think who he looks. There's not even like a celebrity or like a person I can think of that he looks like.
Well, there's like two versions of him. There's like a clean cut version and then like a pretty.
So the long-haired version was when he was recruiting people.
Okay.
So this it's all just so cringe. Okay. So in Hollywood, this was really big in Hollywood circles. Okay. So
Yeah.
like actors, actresses, it was kind of like Scientology in the sense that they thought that they had this like curriculum, this self-help curriculum that you could better yourself in all of
Okay.
these ways. And initially it really just looked almost like professional development or like
Yeah.
self-improvement. Like it looked pretty benign. Keith would run these things and then he had a volleyball team. Keith plays volleyball. It's just it's very cringy to watch him do anything, to be frank.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
before I knew about all the sex stuff. Just looking at him, I'm like, please no.
Right.
Okay. So he runs this, he starts some companies, he has these seminars, and he has like a whole path to greatness, sort of like Scientology, where there's like steps, like levels.
Uh-huh.
So it's like a pyramid scheme. These people come in, they have like orientation, there's all these beautiful people, actors, actresses, they would try to recruit some famous people. Did you ever watch Smallville?
Yes. Okay, so I was just looking at the pictures. I've
Yep.
heard it. I don't know. I'm still going to be shocked about all of this, but I do remember
Mm-hmm.
hearing that the girl from Smallville got involved in some cult.
Yes, there's that really cute one, Kristen Kruk,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she was one of the main stars of the show. And then Allison Mack, who was like a secondary character, still pretty famous.
Yeah.
She got real sucked in. So Kristen Kruk was in for like 7 years or something and got out. But this
Okay.
other chick got in and starts running stuff with him.
That's crazy.
So initially, it's self-help. So this man and this woman start it kind of like a business. There's like a curriculum. You pay money to be
Yeah.
a part of this program, to do these classes. And then it's almost like Awanas or like Girl Scouts, where you're like earning your way through.
Right.
And then they would give different colored scarves when you hit different levels. And
What?
as you hit different levels, then you were considered different things. They had different names. He called himself Vanguard,
Okay.
which is just also so cringe. Okay, so he called himself Vanguard and said that what it means is destruction of my enemies increases my power. That's like what Vanguard meant to him.
Okay.
And then the name was based on the Roman system of debt, which was Nexum. So
Okay.
I
Weird.
know it's very weird, but this thing was
Yeah.
all based on money. It really started as a money thing. And then like all money things, then it turns into a sex thing, right? But it started
Right.
as it was like a money buy into this thing. And Keith knows everything and he's so smart. He actually had like a 2.6 GPA at like a community college. Like the dude
Okay.
knows nothing.
Right.
It's laughable.
Right.
Apparently he just spit some really good game because these people just fell in line, right?
Okay.
So people like Sarah Edmondson get involved. She was kind of a mid-range actress, so beautiful. She gets involved and she's like, this is giving me purpose. I'm doing better in auditions. Like it just, people really had this sense that they were getting better at life the longer they were together. And then they'd get all excited and they'd recruit more people and they'd bring more people in and they'd have more orientations and more classes and more whatever. So as this keeps going, it starts to get really sick and twisty. And Allison Mack is a part of this.
Okay.
So Keith ultimately ends up sleeping with many, many, many of these women, many of them. And then the women, and Allison Mack was a huge part of this. There's a woman named Lauren. I can't think of her last name. She was really a part of this, the daughter of like one of the founders.
Mm-hmm.
They create a subgroup secret society that they call DOS, DOS.
Okay.
Okay, yes. And this was really the women. Now, Keith was in charge of all of this, but it was the women that enforced and created this little group.
Okay.
Within this group, they had to show unfailing loyalty to whoever was like in charge of them. It was like a master slave dynamic.
Right.
So the master told you what you could eat when, what you could do. If you were in trouble, you had to check in multiple times a day. Like it was a lot.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they made the women record false confessions as
Mm.
collateral and made them send nude photos for
Mm.
blackmail. And what they were saying is, this is to make sure you stay faithful. Like, this is how we're going to hold you accountable and keep you faithful to this process that you signed up for.
Right.
Right. And again, free labor. These people
Yep.
are putting in work and they are not making much money, if any,
Yep.
at the bottom. Right. So, the worst part of this, one night, all of the masters messaged all of the slaves, all the downline people, and said, we need to be at this specific house at this specific time. Told them all to strip naked. This is all women. Told them
What?
all to strip naked. I know. And then they branded all of these women with the same brand right on their hip.
No.
Like low on their
Like
hip.
burned them?
Burned them with a
Wow.
brand. And I forget what they told them the brand meant, but actually the brand was Keith's initials.
What a jackwagon.
Oh, he's bad, 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 bad. Okay. So finally, what happens, and this is why Sarah Edmondson is such a star, and
Yes.
watch The Vow because they actually have the documentary happen as these people are leaving.
Oh,
It's
dang.
unbelievable. Even before some of them leave, they have voicemails, they have conversations recorded. Like it's really cool. Actually, the show's cool.
Dang.
So in 2017, and these are the people that are highlighted in this documentary:
Mm-hmm.
Sarah Edmondson, Bonnie PC, Mark Vicente,
Mm-hmm.
and Catherine Oxenberg, who's the mother of India Oxenberg, who was in this group,
Okay.
spoke out to the New York Post. And they're like, bam, they tell the whole story to the New York Post.
Right.
They got out kind of all together.
Okay.
Mark was with Bonnie, Sarah and her husband. Oh, I can't think of his name, but he's real sweet. They're still together, which is just
Okay.
lovely. But they all got out. All of them got out. And they
Dang.
release all this information to the New York Post. So here's where the crime part comes in. Within these groups, there's almost always other things happening. With Hillsong, it was the trafficking, labor, money, like all of that crap was
Mm-hmm.
going down,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's what took down Hillsong ultimately was actually the finances
Right.
and then some of the sexual abuse stuff that they hid, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Same here. So the cult was actually this business of NXIVM was actually fronting the human trafficking, the sexual abuse, the labor
Oh,
trafficking.
dang.
All of this stuff was happening under the guise of this organization.
Right.
So there is an organization act. So it's the RICO Act,
Okay. Okay.
Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. This is the thing that can take down organized crime and stuff like that. So
Okay.
the RICO Act is what some of these organizations end up violating. So Keith Raniere in March of 2018 is arrested and indicted under the RICO Act.
Dang.
And his official charges within that were sex trafficking, forced labor, and visa and wire fraud. He has been convicted.
Good.
He was sentenced to 120 years, but he continues to direct a small group of followers from his prison cell. They literally go outside of the prison and like dance for him. They know which window he's in and they dance on the street for him. There's only like 50 to 60 people now, but still.
Stop it.
No, I'm not kidding you. Like they dance for him. They're still very much like being directed from him, even though he's in prison.
Oh my gosh, I cannot.
I know. So that's NXIVM.
Yep.
So now
Hold on, I gotta ask a question. So is Allison still in it?
Allison, I think, is in prison.
No.
Let me look it up. She got sentenced. Let me see what her sentence was. Okay. She
That's
was sentenced to 3 years in prison. And it looks like she was just released. Let me see when she was released.
and what did she get charged with again?
She was charged with racketeering and conspiracy. She served 2 years. So she was sentenced to 3 years. She served 2 years.
Okay.
And she got out in July of 2023. So she got out last July, about a year ago. But she served 2 years in federal prison. Like they went down hard. This wasn't like probation, slap on the wrist. It was like, oh my gosh,
Like this is, yeah, that's wild.
Yes.
I'm glad they got convicted.
Well, in this one, all kinds of lawsuits. Like Scientologists will sue everybody.
Yeah.
That's one of their methods, right, for controlling information. These guys were the same. So they
Okay.
tried to sue them for coming out with it, but ultimately when you get picked up on the charges, then the lawsuits tend to fall apart, right? So that's sort of what happened. So
Dang.
now this one you can help me explain.
Yes.
7M dance cult.
Ugh, it makes me sad.
It makes me so sad because a couple things. First of all, you're a dancer.
Yes, I was a dancer.
You can still move. I've seen you move. You can still dance.
Salad.
But there's this group of amazing dancers on TikTok, and they've been on there for quite some time.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, Dancing for the Devil documentary comes out on Netflix and exposes this whole like underworld
Yep.
happening with some of these dancers.
Yep. Well, and I think to start that one with those sisters.
Yeah, Miranda and Melanie Wilking. And it's Miranda Derrick now because she's married.
Yes.
But yeah, Miranda and Melanie Wilking.
Yes. So, I mean, the whole documentary starts with them really and how they were this unit and dancers. And then Miranda left to go dance in California and then found these friends who were involved in this group.
Yes. Well, and initially, Melanie and Miranda went together and they built this incredible social media
Yes.
empire. The two of them, they were doing
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
But then they got sucked in with a couple other content creators that were a part of this group.
Yes.
And the thing that's wild about it is basically Miranda fell in love with one of the dancers
Yep.
who was best friends with the son of the cult leader.
Okay.
That's how they got sucked in. So
Okay.
I
I
think
didn't realize there was a son, but I probably missed that.
there was a son. Initially, I thought she fell in love with the son of the cult leader, but no.
Oh,
The
yeah.
cult leader's son was like the videographer, so he was with them all the time. And he introduced Miranda to her now husband.
Yes.
And they were like together pretty immediately. Like, didn't the sister joke that they were on a chat, like the three of them, and then she
got
pushed out?
removed.
She got removed from their chat. She was like,
She was
okay.
like, he likes you.
Yes. And God bless Melanie because Melanie went to one of their events and was like, "Oh no, this is what is this?"
Well, she went to one of the events and she was like skeptical, but then the daughter of the cult called her one
Yes.
time and was like, and she was like gonna go pick up a friend from the airport or something. And
Yes.
she was like, can your friend Uber because you need to come to church tonight? The
Yeah, you
pastor
have
said
to come.
you have to come. And the whole thing about that is you had to be invited in order to go. And so she like went one time, but then was never invited again. So she's like, okay. And then she gets this call where they're like, you have to come. And she's like, hell no. Like,
No.
never been to a church where they're like, you are basically going to hell if you don't come.
Well, and they weren't very religious. Like, I don't think they were not. They were not religious people.
They were.
I don't think they were. I don't think they were.
They were because Miranda talks about in like some of her commentary about all of that is like that she talks about how she found God. It's like the prosperity gospel type of situation.
Well, in the cult, but growing up, they had it.
Oh, correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. No, so
Growing up, they did not grow
growing
up.
up, they didn't really have that context at all. So
No,
when we
correct.
talk about mega church madness and coming up in the prosperity gospel,
Yeah.
they didn't grow up that way. So
No.
Melanie was like, "This is dumb."
Yeah.
Miranda gets very much caught up in it, and Miranda is just like an extra special dancer. Like, she's one of the best dancers I've ever
Oh,
seen.
she's amazing.
And so the dude running this cult, his name is Robert Shin.
Uh-huh.
And it turns out this even isn't even his first go around with the cult. This is like
No.
iteration 2 or 3 of his culty
Yes.
ways,
Yes.
right?
Because they partner, like the Wilking family partners with a girl who was involved in his first round of cult
That's
leading.
right. And
And
again,
she
and
talks to them about it.
he is a pastor, and they
Mhm.
actually show some of his sermons, which they're just so alarming.
Yes.
But he is prosperity gospel in a nutshell. Like,
Yeah.
we are doing these things for God. I'm like, how is hip hop dancing on TikTok for the Lord? But that's cool. Whatever. Do you?
They talk about this type of dance in that documentary called Stomp.
Yeah. Oh, Crump.
Crump.
Yes.
Crump. And that is actually like, because they talk about it being like super emotional
Yes.
or aggressive, but then the people who do it are like, it's actually really emotional in a way that they
Yes.
do worship their, like, that they worship God,
Yes.
which is fascinating. So that's kind of where like some of these dancers originated from. Don't quote me, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure her husband, Miranda's husband, like stemmed from that.
He absolutely
And
does.
that's why this was so intriguing to him.
And to her, because you can see she falls in love with this guy. Here's this whole community that goes to church
Uh-huh.
together. Like, this sounds great on the
Uh-huh.
surface. Unless you're Melinda, who's like, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me to be at church. Like, what's the matter with you?
You mean
Miranda's like,
Melanie?
oh yeah, Melanie. Yeah. Miranda's like, this is the best thing ever. And I have this cute
Uh-huh.
boyfriend and blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh.
So Robert Shin is a nutter butter. So he takes over this church that these kids are all going to. And
Uh-huh.
he's like, you know what? God's going to bless this ministry. And I'm going to be y'all's manager. And they set up remember, finances before sex. So they set
Yep.
up this financial weird thing where how much were they giving back to the church? It was like we talked about tithing in mega church madness, like give 10% of your income.
Yep.
This was like 50, 60%, something
No,
crazy.
it was more than that. It was like 80
I mean, they really never had money for how much money they were bringing in.
ever, ever.
And they had millions of followers on social media, and they were turning this money over. Robert Shin's going, praise God. Like, we're doing so great. We're doing good things. This is why God is blessing us.
Yep.
He buys houses in the
For
LA
them to
area
stay
and
in.
has them all live together,
Yep.
So now
Yep.
he's got the control. And I'm not aware of how much sex stuff happened in the second iteration, but a lot of weird sexual abuse happened, at least in the first iteration of the
Yep.
cult.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't talk a lot about, yeah, it doesn't go into any sexual stuff in the second one,
Mm-mm.
at least yet. Here's the thing. I don't think this is
I
done.
know. I don't either.
So yeah, it doesn't go into that in the 7M one, but it, I mean, there's a deep dive into the power and control and coercion and sexual abuse and all of that from his first go around with being a cult leader.
Oh, I mean, just really messed up people's whole lives,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I
So,
mean, there was like, I can't remember their names, dang it. There's a set of sisters that were in that
mm,
first cult, and one of them got out and one of them didn't. And she like literally basically never left her room, and he would just go in and do whatever he wanted.
mm,
And then at one point, the wife found out
yep.
and like beat the living crap out of her.
Yeah, beat her up.
Yeah.
Just beat her up.
Yep.
And she's not okay. That's one of the hardest things in the documentary. She's not okay. I don't know if she'll ever be okay.
No. Yeah. And she talks about that. I mean, it's like when she interacts with her sister who got out,
Mm.
it's like painful to watch.
Oh, it really is. And they had always been so close.
Yeah.
So they sued Robert Shin because basically the police were like, listen, it's not illegal. They're adults, not illegal to be part of a group, all the things.
Yeah.
So, what the sisters do with the family members of the people who are still in,
Yeah.
because there are several people featured in the documentary who got out.
Yep.
They got out around the same time. So there's
Yep.
a core group of them that just they dipped when things
Yep.
started to get really weird.
Yep.
So the allegations that he's been charged with now criminally, it started with just lawsuits. Now it's turned into more of a criminal matter. The allegations basically that have been pressed against him are fraud, forced labor, human trafficking, and then sexual battery by the one sister.
Yep.
And he will have his trial in July of 2025.
Interesting.
So there's a trial date set. Now you have to wonder like what happens between now and then, and the
Wow.
families like drive to the house and try to make contact and knock on the door and all of it. And there's kind of some interesting debates that I want to run by you. One of the things that comes up is what happens if somebody that you love is in a group like this and they're blowing you off. What it may not be like a Netflix special type group, but it might be a really exclusive, isolated group. They're changing, they're isolating. Could also be a relationship
Mm-hmm.
that is getting really isolated and they're changing and it seems like they're being controlled.
Yep.
What do you recommend now? Like, how do you help that person?
That is such a good question. Honestly, I think you continue to tell them how much you care about them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the things that they talk about in this documentary is like if you stay quiet, the cult wins.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to continue to pursue and tell them how much you care, but then also speak truth of what's going on and what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's hard though because you can't. I don't know if I've ever told you this. I might have. I There was a cult when I was in college that ended up, how do I say this? The cult leader ended up taking a quite a few of my friends
In
under his,
Boulder?
yes,
Oh, you
under
have
his,
not told me this.
yes. I have to be mindful because I don't want to stir up a bunch of stuff, but I can't remember the name of it, but it was one of those types of churches where you had to be invited in order to go.
So it was like little bitty kind of home church.
Yes, but you had to be invited, and it
Okay.
ended up being really, really bad. I actually know a girl who got out, but she was significantly abused, and
Mm.
it was really bad.
This
So,
crap happens. Did they target you?
no,
They wouldn't.
no. One of my good friends, though, it was right when I was moving to Washington, and one
Mm.
of my good friends got really involved in it. And yeah, I mean, we're not friends anymore.
Are they still in it?
I have no idea.
Oh my gosh.
I
You know,
know.
here's the thing. This stuff is out there because that power
Hmm.
piece is just real. Whether it's a yoga class or a church
Yeah.
or a production company or
Yeah.
whatever, like any group is prone to some of these dynamics.
Yeah.
And one of the debates that happens in the documentary is, do you keep the welcome mat open? Because Robert Shin, he got smart
He did get smart.
and he goes, you know what? It is better if they have some contact with their families.
Yes.
And he controls that contact, and it's weird and it's
Yeah.
awkward and uncomfortable.
And they
But they
record
have
it all.
contact.
They
And they
record
record
it
it
all
all. They
and
document
post
it.
it on social media.
Yep.
It's wild.
No, and it's been really uncomfortable because for Melanie, she wants her parents to make it harder, cut her off, make it harder. And the mom's just crying, like, no, I'm not going to not see her. Like, I'm not going to not talk to her. So they have this big debate. And it made me think of a book that a client told me about. It's like Shut Up and Leave the Welcome Mat Out or something. And it's about parenting adult children.
Okay.
But the premise is always leave the door open.
Yeah.
Leave the door open for these people. But then also, I think it's valid to think about the fact that if you do,
Mm-hmm.
will they ever leave?
Yeah.
Like, is
Because
there
they're
a tough love
comfortable.
component, you know?
Yeah. Because they're comfortable. They have their cult and then they also still have their family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
From a prevention perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about like, how do we protect kids from funky
Mm.
churches, from cults, from all this stuff?
Yes.
Because I was thinking about my kid. I'm like, how do I raise him to not get
Yes.
sucked into something weird, you
Yeah.
know? And I realized part of it comes down to your kids need being able to disagree with you.
Yeah.
Your kids have to be able to disagree,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to teach them critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
we don't
huge.
always do that,
Yes, that's huge.
you know? So Nat and I are going to share with you 25 signs that you're in a high control group. Some of these are obvious, some of these are a little bit less obvious. But if
Yes.
you have some of these going on, it is worth looking at. And we will post this website
Uh-huh.
because I think these are so good. And so we'll post them, but we'll go over them real quick too.
Okay. I'm gonna just read the headliners.
Just the headlines.
Okay, perfect. So characteristics of a high control and cult group. So one, there is opposition to critical thought. Just like what Janine just said about her kid. Let people disagree with you. Let your kids disagree with you. Teach them how to critical think. But that's one sign.
Absolutely.
Second, self-doubt is encouraged.
So this means like in NXIVM, where it was constantly, what's wrong with you? Tell us your deepest, darkest. Like
Mhm.
really kind of trying to make you feel bad about yourself so that they can tear you down and you can only be built back up by them.
Yes. Ugh, that's like just like, I mean, power and control.
I know it's yucky.
It's so yucky. Magical thinking is prevalent. Do you want to explain what this one means?
Oh yeah. So often in these groups, there's some, and it can be spiritual, but it can also be psychological
Uh,
that this person has special knowledge, some kind of power, you know, that kind of stuff. There's usually an element of somebody being very powerful in this way, almost in a magical way. And with Keith, his was knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of speaks to the fourth one.
Yes, it does speak to the fourth one. So the fourth one is leaders claim to have special insight and supreme knowledge. So, like, similar to the 7M one, right? He talks about he's really the only one who can deliver the message. And even with what we said about like that girl, Melanie, having quote unquote, having to be at church, right? Because
Yes,
what his message was. So
because
that's,
his message is so much better than every other message.
yes, that's supreme knowledge. The leadership is authoritarian, charismatic, and narcissistic. That's a,
Ah!
that's a big one.
We will get into narcissism. That's a mini episode I'm really looking forward to. Yeah, this one's kind of self-explanatory,
Leaders are not accountable to other authorities. That lines up.
right? Above the law.
Uh-huh. I think they're above the law.
There are draconian and intrusive rules for members. So, like old school and intrusive rules. And we talked about this with Mega Church Madness. Like, you can't have sex with anybody. You can't this, you can't that. Like, it's like, you
Mhm.
know, pound sand, bro. I'm going to live my life. But these people have lots of opinions, and they're
Yep.
usually very old school and very strict.
Yep. 8, the leaders are above the law, which lines up with a few of them.
Well, in whatever law, okay, so they say you can't sleep with anybody, but I'm going to sleep with everybody, right? Like,
Right.
it's just,
Oh, that's right. Like
there is
they're above
kind of
their
this
own law.
conflict. Yes, yes, they're above whatever law they said. It doesn't apply to
Yes.
them.
Yes. Do as I say, not as I do. The flow of information is subject to censorship and control. Yeah.
Yep,
Lines up with 7M.
yep.
The group as a whole is elitist with an elite inner circle at its core. So it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
similar to like the multi-level marketing, the pyramid scheme type of things,
Yep.
like we were saying.
That's so annoying. I think LuLaRoe was an actual cult.
Which one?
LuLaRoe,
What's that?
the legging company. Have you not
Oh,
seen
it was
that?
a cult.
That was culty, a little bit
It,
culty.
it was a cult. They like got like drugged down
Yeah.
because they were culty.
Mm-hmm.
Threats are made against members who leave. Yup.
Mm-hmm.
Outsiders or outside groups are slandered and vilified.
Totally.
Members become increasingly isolated from former companions.
That's
So
like
that
even your
goes,
friends.
yeah, that's like, yeah, my friends, or when Miranda got isolated from her family. And there's
Mm-hmm.
still a level of isolation there because she has to like record everything.
Oh,
Yeah. The group performs secret rites and rituals. That just sounds scary.
I, okay. Real quick, 2 second question or a 2 second thing. So when I joined a sorority,
Uh-huh. Oh,
Delta,
yeah.
Delta, Delta, can I help you, help you, help
I
you?
also think sororities are culty.
Yes. So the sorority had, and I will not share what the ritual is, but I was so nervous about it that I actually moved the blindfold so I could see the whole thing because I'm not going to be taken by surprise by anything.
Oh, heck no.
They told us to wear we had to wear all white, two pairs of underwear, and put tape a dime under one shoe and a quarter under the other, which at the time was enough to make a phone call because I'm an old lady.
Right.
And I was like, oh, hell no. So I moved my little blindfold up so I could see everything that was happening.
Yeah,
Sorry, not sorry, Tridel. I'm going to know what's happening to me.
absolutely. Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
can't
secret
believe
rites
the
and
sorority.
rituals, typically with candles, and it's very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, the word ritual just scares the crap out of me.
I know, I don't like it.
In general, their events involve mind-altering practices.
Yeah, this could be meditation, this could be prayer, but this also could be drugs. I mean, it could be a lot of
Yeah.
things.
And if it's meditation or prayer, it's usually manipulated. So it's not
Yeah,
necessarily like, hey, pray, or
no.
hey, just sit and like think. It's
Mhm.
very directed in their benefit.
Oh, yeah, because they don't want you to sit and think, because if you sit and think, you're
Mm-mm.
going to be like, this is the craziest stuff I've ever heard in my life.
Yep. Members frequently experience feelings of shame, guilt, fear, and dread. Yep.
Not that they'll talk about it.
Yeah, people that I have worked with who have been in cults and have left have historically like super high anxiety,
Yeah.
super high anxiety. Almost every individual I've worked with who has been in some sort of culty type of group will share their experience and are still anxious beings. Show zealous commitment, loyalty, and dependence upon their leaders.
Mm,
So those are the group members doing that.
yeah. Groups have a preoccupation with new members and proselytizing, which is one of the things we talked about with megachurch madness. This is something megachurches do, period.
Yes.
It's all about recruitment. Join our
Yeah.
church, join our church, join our church.
Yeah. They target the vulnerable with love bombing and idealistic goals. That's so true. They just like connect with you through love bombing and you feel so
Mm,
seen and heard. And they like talk about oftentimes, at least the one that I knew of in Boulder,
mm,
talk about like dysfunctional families
yeah,
and, just vulnerable connections. It's pretty scary.
absolutely.
There's evidence of economic or financial exploitation. We literally just talked about that.
And this is usually the thing that gets them in trouble. It's
Yep.
not the mistreatment and the isolation or even the power and the control.
Yep.
It's usually the financial stuff that
Yep.
brings them down.
Thank goodness something can.
Hmm.
Punitive punishment, even physical abuse. This showed up. Was it the 7M cult? Yes.
Yes, yes. Because the one sister was abused. And then in NXIVM, they kept this one poor woman in a room for like 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Like
There's
2 years.
Janine. There's this other documentary. I can't believe I'm just thinking of it and I can't remember it. We'll have to do a mini on it.
Okay.
But it's like, it's the, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't remember this. Anyway, super short, super short. It's about this guy who is insane, has this daughter in college. He moves in with her and then basically like recruits all her friends and they become like they like worship him and it's so bad. Oh my
What are
gosh.
you talking about?
Oh my gosh. I will find out the name and we'll do a mini on this, you
We
guys.
have to.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe I'm just thinking of this. I'll figure it out. I'll find the name.
Oh, you have to.
My brain kept going between that one and 7M because I watched them around the same time.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And that's why I was thinking like, no, maybe, but no, I'm thinking of a total different one. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah, we're doing that one for sure.
Yep. Yep. It's crazy. Here. Okay. There's evidence of sexual exploitation. We talked about that.
Yep.
Women especially are tightly controlled. Yep.
Because of sex and patriarchy and misogyny and all the things.
All the things.
Oh, all the things.
I know. I'm reading the list and I can just feel your cringe.
I know, right? Could you see it on my face? I'm like,
Well, wasn't looking at your face, but I could feel it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You know me well.
Yes. Deception is normalized and the ends always justify the means.
Mm.
So,
And this website that we're going to put up that has this information, contrast that with safe groups, which I think is really cool. So you can look at it and be like, am I in a safe or an unsafe group?
yep.
And really, the bottom line is no one should ever be in charge of what you do,
Or how you think.
how you think, what you do. And if you can't ask questions in a church, in a small group, anywhere, anytime,
Yeah.
you're in a rough spot. And sometimes jobs can be high control groups.
Yeah.
They may not have the sexual exploitation piece, but you may not be able to like ask questions safely. You might have somebody at the helm that is an unsafe person. And if that happens, you got to know and probably get out of there because it'll take a toll on you.
Yep. Or be told, hey, you can't talk about this with coworkers.
Yes. I think at the heart of this one for me, Nat, is the prevention piece of recognizing if it's happening, but
Yep.
then also the brave people who blow this stuff up.
Yes.
Like Sarah Edmondson is a queen. She's just a
Yeah.
queen.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll put in on social media like a link to her podcast because she's a really cool person.
And she does a TED Talk too.
Oh, that's awesome. Maybe we'll do a link to that too.
Yeah, she does a TED Talk called How to Spot a Cult.
Love that.
So,
Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining tonight, and we'll see you next time.
bye, forensic friends.
I'm Janine.
And I'm Nat.
And as always, thanks for listening, and join us next week for more crime, psychology, and heart.